25-year-old Michelle Leng, known in Australia as Michelle, was an international student living in Campsie, New South Wales. Michelle was an only child. After losing her father in 2008, she and her mother May grew even closer. May described her daughter as deeply compassionate, someone who felt everything for everyone around her and always went out of her way to support her friends, even when she was struggling herself. In 2011, Michelle made a brave and life-changing decision. She left Chengdu, China to study in Australia. Though May was nervous, she was immensely proud of her daughter's determination to step out of her comfort zone and build a future for herself abroad. She poured every bit of her savings into helping Michelle chase that dream. Fortunately, Michelle already had family in Australia. She moved in with her aunt, uncle, and cousin in Campsie, a suburb of Sydney. Once settled, she began sending money home to her mother whenever she could, a gesture that reflected her gratitude and selflessness. By 2016, Michelle had spent 5 years in Australia. She had a close group of friends, loved her community, and was excelling in her studies. After completing a business degree at the University of Technology, Sydney, she began furthering her education at the Sydney Institute of Interpreting and Translation. April 21, 2016. It was a warm Thursday afternoon when Michelle met a couple of friends near the university. After saying goodbye, she boarded a bus outside the University of Technology and mentioned she was heading to Pitt Street Mall for some shopping. CCTV later showed Michelle casually browsing stores, appearing relaxed and content. She wore jeans, a long-sleeved grey top, and carried a red shoulder bag. Nothing seemed unusual. At 3 p.m., she was captured buying a juice before taking a train from St. James Station at 4 p.m. Arriving back at Campsie Station around 4:30 p.m., she continued chatting with friends online into the late afternoon, and then suddenly, all communication stopped. Her phone went silent. Her normally active social media accounts went dark, and the next morning she didn't show up on campus. At first, her disappearance didn't trigger immediate alarm. It wasn't until 4 days later, when her aunt returned from a weekend away, that panic set in. Realizing Michelle hadn't been seen or heard from, she and her husband Barrett went straight to the police to file a missing person report. Friends told police that nothing about Michelle's behavior that day had seemed unusual. She'd been cheerful and herself. CCTV offered no signs of distress or that anyone was following her. But while her family and friends anxiously searched for answers, another story, 60 miles away, was making headlines. The Snapper Point blowhole on the New South Wales Central Coast is a scenic yet dangerous cliffside area, known for its sharp rocks, powerful waves, and fatal falls. On April 24, 2016, a tourist walking near the blowhole spotted something floating in the water below. At first they assumed it was a swimmer, but as they looked closer, they realized the figure was motionless, face down. At 10:30 a.m., paramedics were lowered into the churning water by helicopter. What they pulled out was not the result of a tragic accident. It was a young woman's body, completely naked and covered in stab wounds. She had been stabbed nearly 40 times with the fatal wound to her throat. The injuries showed clear signs of a violent struggle. The woman had fought desperately for her life. Police quickly concluded that she had been left at the blowhole, not washed up there by the sea. Heavy surf conditions that day made it unlikely that she had drifted in from elsewhere. At a press conference, a detective chief inspector stated, "It was just after 10:30 this morning when police were called to Snapper Point following reports of a body found face down in the blowhole. Post-mortem results show the victim suffered multiple stab wounds. It was a violent assault prior to death." The woman, believed to be of Asian descent, aged between 20 and 35, had shoulder-length dark hair and no identifying marks or tattoos. All jewelry had been removed. A computer-generated image of the victim was released to the public. The media dubbed her the Snapper Point blowhole Jane Doe. Online, people began connecting the dots: an Asian woman missing from Sydney and a Jane Doe found days later on the coast. Soon after, DNA tests confirmed the heartbreaking truth. The body was that of 25-year-old Michelle Leng. Police quickly zeroed in on a suspect. Surveillance footage, phone data, and vehicle tracking led them to a chilling discovery. Her car, matching one registered to Michelle's uncle, had been captured entering Munmore State Conservation Area near Snapper Point, 4 hours before her body was found. The driver was 27-year-old Derek Barrett, Michelle's uncle, and the same man who had helped report her missing. A search of Derek's phone revealed disturbing photos of Michelle bound and gagged on her bed with duct tape and a white cloth around her mouth. Detectives described the expression on her face as haunting, one they would never forget. Michelle's mother, May, devastated by the loss of her only child, thanked police and the Australian Chinese community for their support. A fundraising campaign was launched to help with funeral costs and to support her in her grief. Derek Barrett was denied bail and remained silent during his first court appearance. 2 months later, he faced 27 charges, including detaining for advantage, indecent assault, and murder. Investigators pieced together what had happened. Michelle had likely been attacked soon after arriving home that Thursday. Alone in the house, she was restrained and assaulted by her uncle. Later that evening, her cousin came home, unaware Michelle was captive in a nearby room. Between April 21st and April 24th, Derek brutally murdered her. On the morning of the 24th, he wrapped her body in plastic, drove to Snapper Point, bought snacks along the way, and threw her body off the cliff into the same spot Michelle had once joyfully photographed and shared on Instagram during an earlier trip. Derek Barrett pleaded not guilty to murder. Michelle's family, who flew in from China, attended every hearing. Her mother, standing side by side with the wife of the accused, faced the unimaginable, seeking justice for her daughter in a foreign country. Michelle's story made national headlines in China, sending shockwaves through communities of international students and parents abroad. A tragic reminder of how a dream for a better future was stolen in an act of unimaginable cruelty. 18 months later, in December 2017, Derek Barrett finally pleaded guilty. He admitted to binding and gagging Michelle before murdering her and dumping her body at Snapper Point. Derek also pleaded guilty to 21 additional offenses, including 19 counts of filming Michelle for sexual gratification, 1 count of detaining a person with intent to obtain advantage, and 3 counts of committing an act of indecency with a person aged over 16. During sentencing, Derek claimed he had been struggling with substance abuse, using methamphetamine and synthetic cannabis around the time of the murder. He insisted he had no memory of what happened that weekend, only fragments of seeing his reflection in the mirror and blood in the sink. But the judge rejected his story, calling his distress contrived and self-serving. A forensic psychologist, Dr. F, told the court that Derek had faked amnesia to avoid responsibility. He noted pointedly, Derek's claim of a methamphetamine addiction simply doesn't ring true. So I've never seen an obese methamphetamine addict. Dr. F went on to say that Derek displayed a complete lack of empathy and no genuine insight into his crimes. Taking photos of the victim bound and gagged moments before her death, and then disposing of her body so far away, these are acts highly suggestive of sexual deviance and sadism, he concluded. Derek wrote a letter to Michelle's mother. May, it read in part, "I can only imagine what you are going through from your loss. Every moment of my life, I wish I could go back in time and take back that day that caused so much pain. I let my own problems spill into the family home, and they paid dearly as a result. This moment in my life has kept me awake at night in tears. I still have nightmares. I lost everything because of a stupid weekend. My perception of that time is hazy. You have no idea how much it frustrates me every day trying to understand how this happened, why I went down this path. I betrayed my own family and hers. I discussed myself, but Justice Helen Wilson was unmoved. She said Derek's words sounded rehearsed, an act meant to elicit sympathy rather than remorse. Her words in court were scathing. This was a despicable crime of extreme brutality and wickedness, a depraved and sadistic act, committed by a man in a position of trust, in a place that should have been one of safety and refuge for Miss Leng. She described Derek as a socially inadequate man, driven by sexual perversion and sadism. The court recognized the case as one of the most harrowing in recent memory.
Derek Barrett's crime was already sadistic, but the whole horror was hidden until now.
He had the air in the witness box of someone playing a part and saying what he thought he should say to present the best possible impression of himself.
Derek showed no emotion as the verdict was read, staring at the floor, his tears reserved only for himself. He was sentenced to 46 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 34 years. While not technically a life sentence, he would likely be in his 70s before ever walking free. Outside court, police addressed the media. The murder of Miss Leng was a horrendous, senseless act that's impacted many lives. The court sentence reflects the seriousness of the offense. The family is traumatized and asks for privacy at this difficult time, but this case was far from over. In November 2019, nearly 3 years after Derek's conviction, the investigation took a shocking new turn. An elderly woman with dementia, whose identity remains private, was found sitting at her kitchen table, holding what police described as a heavy-duty, weatherproof USB stick. Her daughter, visiting to check on her, noticed the device and asked where it came from. The woman said she thought it was a toy. She had no idea how she'd gotten it. When the daughter plugged it into her computer, she was horrified. The USB contained 9 video files totaling over an hour, and 13 images, all showing Derek Barrett raping and torturing Michelle Leng. In one video, Michelle's hands were bound so tightly they were swollen and purple. Derek was seen cutting the tape off with a large hunting knife, then retaping her hands before saying, "Now where were we?" Before continuing the assault. The files also included secret footage of Michelle and Derek's stepdaughter, filmed while they slept or showered, with Derek appearing in some videos touching himself as he watched them. Police matched several of these images to files Derek had deleted from his phone just days before his arrest in an attempt to erase evidence. The elderly woman who had the USB had no connection to Derek, but she lived only a few miles from his former home. How the device ended up in her possession remains a mystery. Following the discovery, Derek faced 17 new charges, including multiple counts of aggravated sexual assault and indecent assault. Investigators revealed that Michelle's aunt had been away frequently for work in Wollongong, unaware of what her husband had been doing inside their home. She was devastated with guilt when the truth came out. When Michelle's mother received the call about the USB, she said she nearly fainted. When police told me the video showed how my daughter was degradingly raped and agonizingly tortured, I felt my body go numb. My elderly mother collapsed in grief and passed away soon after. How can any mother accept such news? Derek Barrett pleaded guilty to all 17 new offenses, but to the family's dismay, he could not receive a separate new sentence. Under Australian law, the court could not reopen or replace the 2017 murder sentence. It could only add time. The judge stated, had the full extent of his depravity been known in 2017, Derek Barrett would have been sentenced to life imprisonment. Unfortunately, the law does not permit revisiting a concluded sentence. Instead, the court added an additional 20 years to be served concurrently with his existing term. His non-parole period was extended by 2 years, meaning he will now be eligible for parole in 2052, not 2050. This case remains one of the most twisted and depraved in Australian history. Michelle Leng was a hard-working, hopeful young woman thousands of miles from home, striving to build a better life for herself and her mother. She lived in what she believed was a safe home, surrounded by family she trusted. For her mother, who had already lost her husband years earlier, the loss of her only child and the betrayal by a relative she once called family became an agony beyond words. Even today, we still cannot accept that she has left us. The suffering is endless. Time will never return to when Mangmi and I lived happily together. Now that my child is gone, my whole life is shattered.